We are the parents whose children were attacked by a nurse at Grantham Hospital nearly 3 years ago. In just 8 weeks, Beverly Allett attacked 13 children. 4 of them were murdered. My son Liam was admitted to hospital with a chest cold. 2 days later, he was dead. We know that Beverly Allett committed those crimes, but what we as parents also want to know is how she was allowed to go on and on killing and attacking our children. Were individuals to blame, or was it the system itself? The same system which still operates in hospitals just like Grantham all over the country.
This is the story of the 12 families who were the victims of Beverly Allett. Allett suffered from a severe personality disorder called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. She attacked children as a way of getting attention, and in May 1993 was given 13 life sentences for her crimes.
We got life sentences too. We're still being kept in the dark. No one in authority has told us what really happened. We've learned more from the media and the police than anyone else. The clothing inquiry has been sitting for the last 9 months. Set up by the Secretary of State for Health, it's receiving its evidence in private. This evidence will not be published. We had just 40 minutes with Sir Cecil. In the next 40 minutes, we're going to try to piece together what really happened.
Well, I think the main question that I think we've all asked is who took her on? Why did she get the job in the first place?
Right.
Who's responsible for that?
Yeah, I agree, because if she hadn't been taken on, none of these tragedies would have taken place.
No, that's right.
That's got to be a starting point.
That's right.
But I think if you follow on from that, you've got to ask who was in charge.
No, that's a question we've all asked. Who was in charge?
But there are a lot more questions than just who was in charge of Allett.
Yeah.
So it covers a lot of things, that question.
Right. Number 3.
Well, if you ask who was in charge, Chris, perhaps you have to think about then why wasn't the ward closed? And that's another important point in stopping these tragedies, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if the ward had been closed,
Yeah.
then they would have not been able to continue.
The next question's got to be why are the public excluded?
Why are we excluded?
Do you not agree?
Yeah, I do, and I think that covers lots of things as well, because if we hadn't have been excluded, we may have been able to, for instance, if we'd known what was going on in the ward, many of us wouldn't have taken our children there.
Exactly.
So the ward may have closed by our absence.
Exactly.
Grantham Hospital prevented us from filming too, so all the hospital scenes were shot in London and Staffordshire. But what happened on Ward 4? Day 1. 3 days after Allett starts work on Ward 4, Liam Taylor goes in with a chest cold. No one thought it would be fatal. It was Allett's first attack.
We were told he would probably be in there for 2 or 3 days before he went home. We only left the hospital for a matter of an hour because I'd gone to the hospital straight from work. And when we returned, he was seriously ill. He then got better and then got seriously ill again, at which point he suffered the brain damage. And then he died probably 6 hours after that. It went to a post-mortem because we wanted to know the answers to why he had died, because no one seemed to know. It came back that he had suffered a heart attack, which the consultant, Charit Naniakara, never agreed with at that point, because he couldn't interpret his clinical findings, and they didn't match to say that that's what would have happened to Liam.
They said the sort of heart attack Liam had had is what you would normally find in a 50-year-old that drinks, eats, smokes, does everything too much. That's the sort of heart attack. Well, when you're talking of an 8-week-old little boy, I mean, that just goes to show it was something was not right.
Day 13. Timothy Hardwick's attacked. A heart attack kills him on the same day. Day 18. Kaylee Desmond's injected with air. She suffers 2 respiratory attacks and is rushed to the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham. The emergency crash team turns out 4 times in just 2.5 weeks. It's usually once or twice a year. Their reports aren't acted on, but the attacks keep coming. Day 28. Paul Crampton is admitted with a wheezy chest. Day 31. His blood sugar level drops dramatically. Day 36. The doctors order a blood test for insulin. Unknown to anyone, it contains the clue to murder.
We understood what caused the attacks, because clearly that was a low blood sugar count. So that was quite precise, but what we didn't understand was why he had a low blood sugar count, and it appeared neither did the hospital or their consultants.
The doctors suspect Munchausen syndrome, that one of the parents is attacking our children. No one considers the staff. Day 38. My own son Bradley Gibson becomes the 5th victim. Another heart attack on the ward.
Not long after our son had died, and we was reading the local paper about Bradley Gibson being brought back to life when his heart stopped. And we were saying to ourselves then, well, it sounds very similar to what happened to our little boy. We knew there was something wrong. We knew that at that point, whether it had been criminal, accidental, or just a virus on the ward, we knew there was something wrong. And yet the people who were in charge and the people that were running the hospital, they never seemed to have done anything, and it just went on for such a long length of time.
5 weeks on, there have been 9 attacks on 5 children. 2 are dead. The crash team reports pile up. Day 39. Easter Sunday. Yik Hung Chan has 2 heart attacks. Paul Crampton's blood sample sits in a lab. The vital clue lies undiscovered. Day 40. Becky Phillips goes in with feeding problems. Day 43. She's sent home well. Day 44. She dies.
I was just sitting down to watch EastEnders, and I had Becky in a chair. Well, both of them, they had their own chairs either side of me, facing me, and I was watching the TV, and for some reason I happened to look down at Becky, and she was looking at me like that, but her irises weren't there. Her eyes had gone up into the sockets and just left the whites, and it was like a horror film. And I looked again, and she was still the same, and I was touching her face, and it was all sort of cold and clammy and contorting. And I picked her out of the chair, and her eyes rolled back down, and she just screamed. And I started to walk up and down with her. Kate was still asleep, and then she was fine. She just seemed to come round, and she was okay.
Unknown to Sue and Peter, Becky had been injected with slow-acting insulin. It only took effect when she came home.
She'd had a huge hyperglycemic attack, which was caused by being injected with insulin, which she shouldn't have had because she wasn't diabetic. She'd been having the attacks since 7:30 that evening, and when I fed her at around about 11 o'clock, it suppressed the insulin. The sugar in the milk suppressed the insulin, so that at 3 o'clock in the morning the milk had been digested and the insulin had built back up, and it just shot through her bloodstream, through her heart, into her brain, and killed her brain and her heart.
What did the hospital think had happened to her at the time?
They said it was a sudden infant death syndrome. A cot death, in other words. They said that's what it was.
Becky's symptoms were the same as Paul Crampton's, but no one put two and two together. After 8 days, Paul's blood sample is still stuck in the system. On the day Becky dies, her twin sister Katie is attacked. A perfectly healthy baby, only in for observation after Becky's death. Day 46. She's attacked again.
Sunday afternoon, we went upstairs in the hospital to the canteen for a late lunch, around about 1:30, 1:45 it was. Left Katie with Beverly Allett. She was feeding her, and we must have been 20 minutes at the most. Came back down the stairs, walked onto the ward, and all we saw was Beverly Allett running out of Katie's cubicle with Katie in her arms, shouting resus, which is, you know, they want the trolley because she's cardiac arrested again. They want the paddles. Headed into the treatment room. A nurse dialed the cardiac arrest team to come, and Dr. Nanakara, and that was the final attack she had. But it took them until 5:30 at night to stabilise her, and then Dr. Nanakara called out some consultants from Queen's Hospital in Nottingham and from Nottingham City Hospital to take her by ambulance to there because they couldn't help her anymore. He didn't know what was going on.
How is Katie now?
She's severely brain damaged. She's got spastic quadriplegia, which means all 4 limbs are affected. She's got reasonable speech, but she's got no balance at all. She can't walk, she can't feed herself properly, she can't drink from a cup, she still has to have a bottle. She's still in nappies and she's nearly 3. She goes to a special school. She actually ends up travelling 56 miles a day for educational needs. And it's all thanks to Grantham Hospital, I'm afraid.
Day 46. Michael Davidson is admitted to Ward 4. On day 48, he becomes the 9th child to be attacked.
Michael was brought up about midnight. Now, at that time, Katie Phillips was in the treatment room, having suffered a cardiac arrest herself, and there was no signs that there was anything amiss. There was no people dashing backwards and forwards or anything like that. You wouldn't have known there was anything going on.
Day 51. The blood sample result for Paul Crampton comes through. A 4-hour test has taken 15 days. Beverly Allett has murdered Liam, Timothy and Becky. There is now hard evidence that something is wrong. Day 52. Allett attacks Christopher Peasgood twice.
They couldn't understand why he'd had this arrest. They said, it was probably just a hiccup in the illness that he'd got. And they said everything would be fine from then on and he would start to pick up. Then they came and asked us if we'd like to have him christened. So we decided to go away and have a discussion about it. And we came back and said, yeah, we would like to have him christened under the circumstances. And with that, he had a second arrest, straight out of the blue. It's very rare for a child to have an arrest, so we've been told since. And to have that amount of children have that amount of arrests in that number of weeks, it's impossible for it to be normal.
Cardiac crash call. Please dial 4998 immediately.
Day 53. The day after Christopher Peasgood's attack, Christopher King suffers an arrest. Day 55. He has 3 more in one day. 22 days after Paul's blood sample was taken, everyone knows there's a problem.
He was admitted on the Thursday, and on the Friday they actually got Paul Crampton's blood test back with the high level of insulin. So they had concrete evidence. I mean, they knew something was going on and they had the evidence there to prove it. And they still didn't shut the ward down. And they still didn't tell the parents on the ward.
Porter had received information from Cardiff Labs that morning, on the Friday morning when my son was admitted, saying that David Crampton's son had got 500 millilitres of insulin in his body, which had got to have been put there somehow. Well, I mean, to me that is evidence. It had got to have been injected into him somehow. It doesn't just arrive on its own.
Despite deaths, emergency transfers, crash team calls and the blood test result, no one calls the police or closes the ward. They're still accepting children as patients. Day 55. Patrick Elstone, a twin, enters the ward with gastroenteritis. Police say that 2 days later Alec tries to suffocate him.
Cardiac crash call. Please dial 499.
He's now brain damaged. Beverly Allett has been present at more than 20 arrests. The ward night sister wonders if Allett is coping, and she suggests counselling. By now, Ward 4 has averaged 1 arrest every 2 days. Day 61. Claire Peck is attacked, the 13th and last child. Injected by Allett, she suffers 2 respiratory and heart attacks on the same day. She's the 4th to die. As Claire dies, a doctor turns to her mother and tells her this should never have happened.
We need to know who it was who let our children die. Was this just an isolated series of murders, or were others partly to blame? What happened in Grantham 3 years ago is every parent's nightmare. Tiny children, mostly with minor ailments, taken into the care of a local hospital and coming out dead or scarred for life. If it was fiction, it would be unbelievable. 26 heart and respiratory attacks in 13 children over 61 days. In the second part of this programme, we're going to look at where the blame lies. I think that gives us the basis to start with and look at the people involved, the people who we might like to ask those questions of, or more detailed questions.
Start with number 1 then. Who took Alec on? Who would be responsible?
After, obviously, all the verdicts were read out at court, her barrister got up and read a long list of things, and it became so apparent that the girl had got mental problems, had been treated at Grantham Hospital for the majority of these problems for the previous, up to 5-6 years. Her sickness record during her 2 years of training was astronomical. I would think, as any employer, would not have employed her just for the sickness record
She had something like over 100 days off sick in 1 year.
It just...
And any prospective employer has got to think, well,
why?
that's virtually a third of the year she's going to be off work. And we've still got to pay her. Well, why employ her when they've got the choice? I mean, she was turned down by three unit managers at Grantham Hospital refused to employ her, but they still employ her on the, a children's ward where she can do the most damage.
Alec was well known as a hypochondriac to her GP and the hospital. But her medical records weren't checked before she trained as a nurse. She could have been screened out then. Hospital staff thought they couldn't say anything because of patient confidentiality. But that isn't true. If public safety's at risk, the rules don't apply. The ward sister and her boss Moira Onions took Alec on.
Sister and I interviewed her before I went on leave, because Sister was needing staff on the ward the following week. And it was, if she'd been successful at interview, we were going to allow her. Sister requested that we had some help on the ward, and if Miss Alec was successful, she could continue on the ward.
They weren't really 100% happy, but as well, they gave her the job because they needed a nurse, because they were so understaffed.
Well, there were some guidelines released in October 91 by the Department of Health, which said that for every shift you should have 2 registered sick children's nurses. And as far as meeting that, we were quite well behind, really.
What was the situation on Ward 4?
We'd generally have 1 on each shift, but it wasn't always possible to cover all the shifts. So we're generally 1 on each shift, but not always.
So the ward was generally understaffed according to those guidelines?
According to those guidelines, yes.
They probably didn't really want to, but they had to take her on because there was no other choice. And I'm probably blaming them because of taking her on, but they're probably blaming the health authorities because they had no other choice, because they were so understaffed they had to take someone rather than no one.
It was crisis management long before Alec came along. With too few nurses, there were no ward meetings, and juniors like Alec were often unsupervised. The 2 consultants were overworked, there was no registrar, and the junior doctors were inexperienced. Staff couldn't see what was unfolding before their eyes.
A lot of people on the ward felt things weren't right, but nobody actually sat down and discussed it for a long, long time. I think that's the understanding I came out of court with. Dr. Porter knew that so many children had collapsed and died. Dr. Nanyakara knew that so many children had collapsed and died, but they never actually knew about the ones that had collapsed and died in the others' care.
But that wasn't all. When Liam died, why did the coroner accept a heart attack as the cause of death? And why was the ward dependent on a locum pathologist? Did Dr. Nanyakara pursue his suspicion of Munchausen syndrome? What arrangements did Dr. Porter make for Paul's blood test? And why the delay when the results were known?
There was a nurse who had been looking after him called Claire, and we asked her what she thought. What would she do in our position? And her words will stick there forever. Move him, because if you don't, he'll be dead before the morning. And we just thought she meant medical reasons, he was so ill, and we told them to move him. But now I strongly believe she knew something was wrong. She knew there was something wrong on that ward, and that's why she gave us that advice.
Sadly, we all had one piece of jigsaw. Many of us had a piece of jigsaw, but holding it individually, it was meaningless. It was only when those pieces of jigsaw were put together that we could see the outline and that things were not as they should be.
Attacks happened, but because they happened in a short space of time, there often wasn't time to evaluate what had happened before the next one happened. And really, we were doing crisis management, if you like. We were managing to cope on a day-to-day basis.
So if we look at through them,
Yeah.
why didn't they close the ward?
with all the signals they had, with all the things that were going on.
Christopher King's mother, Belinda, was a nurse in Grantham Hospital at the time.
There was no medical reason for these children to collapse. And that, to me, warranted a ward to be shut down. I'd never worked anywhere and ever heard of anywhere where there's such a high level of unexplained deaths and the ward's been shut down. Except, I've heard it on the news if there's been unexplained deaths. I mean, I think I can remember hearing about it in a nursing home, and the home was shut down until they found out the reason why. But I've never known a ward to be shut down, but I've never known a mass murderer be let loose on a ward for such a long length of time.
It had been closed several times because of medical staffing problems. It would be closed for a period of 12 hours or to cover an appropriate doctor's shift. But that caused a lot of problems within the community. So the idea of closing it was not discussed at any level.
At the ward level, we want to be saying, having given the problems, why did you not take action? And then going to at the management level and saying, were these problems reported to you? If so, why didn't you take action? And if they weren't being reported to you, why had you not set up a management procedure? The problems of this nature were reported back up to you, so you could take the appropriate action.
The communication systems in this hospital obviously failed. But is this a medical or a managerial matter? The managers won't say. They may not be criminals like Allet, but did they play a part in things that went wrong? The authorities won't talk either, and yet supposedly they answer to us. We pay their wages. Their final refusal to take part in this programme left us no alternative but to secretly record these phone calls. We talked to Grantham's general manager at the time.
Hello?
Hello, Martin Gibson?
Yes?
Hello, it's David Crampton.
Oh, hello.
Hello there. You by now are aware that we're being involved with a film, making a film with the company. And I know the researchers have spoken to you in the past. And I'm ringing to see if I could ask you to be involved in that film, give us an interview, and perhaps give us your side of the story, and obviously answer a few questions that we would like to ask you.
I'm not prepared at this point in time, and that's as far as I'm prepared to go.
We purposely made an appointment to go and see Martin Gibson and put it to him that he knew there was something wrong on the ward and what was being done about it. And he said they'd done all these swab testings and various other tests, microbiology tests, etc. And I said, well, what is your excuse for not closing the ward down? Surely the children's lives are more important than, anything else in the hospital.
Grantham Hospital Management has got responsibilities in that direction. I've left there now, and I was asked by Westminster Strategy to refer all inquiries back to them.
Even now, at this stage?
Well, I mean, that hasn't altered.
Right.
Who are Westminster Strategy? I've never heard of them before until all this happened. What is their function?
Why did health service managers need Westminster Strategy, a PR firm, to speak for them? The deputy hospital manager at the time was Peter Flood.
Well, I actually went to see Mr. Flood in connection with my own working at Grantham, and it was during one of the conversations with Mr. Flood that I asked him why the hospital couldn't have shut the ward down, to have stopped so much, to stop it. It needn't have gone on so long, and that was when I was given the answer. If they had shut Ward 4 down, then they could lose the paediatric consultants. So if the paediatric consultants went, they'd have to shut the special care baby unit down. If they shut that down, they would then lose the maternity service. And as far as I can understand it, the maternity services generated such a lot of money because the majority of mothers came in, they were there for a short length of time, and the money could be used in other areas of the hospital. It was all income related.
Belinda may be right. We'll never know. We do know that Trent tried to keep a low profile, but as the health authority in charge, they owe us an explanation.
Chairman.
Trent Health.
Yes.
Sir Michael Carlisle has been chairman of Trent Health since 1982.
Hello?
Oh, hello. Is that Sir Michael?
Yes.
Oh, hello there. My name is Judith Gibson. I don't know whether you recognise the name or not. I'm one of the parents who were involved with the Beverley Alec case.
Oh, right.
I'm sure that you've been contacted by some people who are helping us make a TV programme.
That's right, and I couldn't touch it.
Could you tell me why not?
Well, until Claudia has reported, I mean, it's just not on, as far as we're concerned.
Right. Would you be available to speak to us after the inquiry's been completed?
Well, I mean, I might, but have you spoken to Dr. Woods, Regional General Manager?
Right, so if I contact Dr. Woods, he will talk to me and give me the answers that I'm looking for.
He'll probably give you the same answer as I've given you.
Then what is the point of you telling me to ring him?
Well, if you want it from another source, and he will be coordinating as far as the region's concerned, the response that we shall make, if any, at this stage.
The attitude didn't change when the District Health Authority brought in NHS troubleshooter Alistair Stewart to replace Martin Gibson.
Well, actually, I could read a short part of a letter that I received from Alistair Stewart concerning the issue. It says here, strong emotion, which obviously there is some of that, can lead people to make statements of a wide and sweeping nature, which they might, on reflection, consider to be unreasonable. I'm advising her to beware speaking in terms which might be seen as defamatory and unwarranted to the hospital and the NHS.
What does that mean?
That means keep your mouth shut, Mrs. King.
We were not allowed to speak to parents. I think that any communication outside the hospital would actually had to go through Westminster strategy. So, of course, it's restricting, isn't it?
But I mean, that's the question to ask Grantham Hospital Management and Trent's Management and Westminster Strategy and possibly the Secretary of State for Health. Why were these people employed? What was their function?
But why were Westminster Strategy, I mean, as I understand it, Westminster Strategy are political lobbyists.
Well,
were they lobbying Parliament?
I just could not comment on that at all, and I think it's inappropriate to do so. I'm really not trying to be personally defensive, but that is the line that I'm sure you'll find is prevalent.
As children lay dying on Ward 4, there was no money to pay for life-saving equipment that cost £6,000. But Trent Health were happy to pay £161,000 to Westminster Strategy to manage the news.
For the Health Authority, it seems that saving face is more important than saving lives. These are the images they produced for us to show you. Their overriding concern's been to disclaim responsibility by building a wall of silence. But it won't wash. The Health Service must win back our trust. A statutory inquiry with disclosure of evidence and the right to cross-examine would have been a start. It was what everyone wanted, except Trent. The decision was the Secretary of State's. She refused our demand for a public inquiry. She also refused our request to be filmed.
Until Trent Regional Health Authority, till the NHS as a whole, opens its doors and say, look, this is the big mess that we made at Grantham Hospital. This is what happened. We're so sorry, but there it is. That's the entire truth. People don't deserve to be trusted again.
Do you think they've got almost too much to lose?
I don't know why. I think the people that made the mistakes have got too far to fall, and that's why it's not coming out.
I think they're covering their own backs, a lot of them. The people that made the decisions.
They've got to, because if it was a nurse's decision not to shut the ward,
Should have been.
She'd have been gone long ago, because they have. They've got rid of the paediatricians, they've got rid of the sister. The people that they can afford to get rid of have gone.
The doctors obviously have gone. And are waiting for their appeal, as you say. Peter Flood, myself, Roger Arnott, who was there as the personnel manager, he's moved on, and his assistants moved on, and the educational tutors have moved on. So everyone that was there within above the middle management structure has been removed from post at Grantham Hospital.
It seems to me as though they're making scapegoats of certain individuals to make it look as though they've done something where they haven't really got to the root of the problem. Because nothing's changed as far as we know.
What happened to our children can't be put down to individual mistakes. The issues are bigger than that, and the authorities can't escape their share of the blame, nor the way they shut us out. The government owes you and us a full explanation. Our final question is simple. Is Grantham really any different to any other hospital in the NHS?
We certainly don't want to damage our local hospital. We want to improve it. But if the Patients' Charter means anything, it must mean accountability at all levels. However, it is clear in this case that the political interests have overridden the interests of the public. We can only hope that Sir Cecil Clavier places the blame squarely where it belongs.
Because we believe it could happen anywhere in the country. The health authority is so run down, they're so short of staff. If that ward had been properly staffed, it wouldn't have happened. She wouldn't have had the opportunities that she had to do what she did to our children. And every ward in this country is on demand. No staff, no money. So it could happen anywhere, in any hospital. They haven't got the staff and they haven't got the equipment. So who's to say it's a one-off? It could happen tomorrow somewhere else, under the same circumstances, because they're all running under the same circumstances.